going on, guys? Jet fan here, Vanguard on the screen. Going to be running through real quick. Nelson there. So just running through the basically the numbers with Nelson on the screen. Feel free to rewind or pause on anything you want to look at specifically. Armor view coming up. Just a quick note: 32 millimeter bow and aft. So, and a quick look at the Citadel for you guys. Just note that if you give your broadside, you can be Citadel in this thing. So from Arena, I was able to get another insignia. So that gave me 5 of them, which means that I was able to get Nelson up to level 16. So I get that second heal. So now all my British battleships have 5 heals, which is good because, Vanguard has a good heal, especially after the buffs. I think this ship is relatively decent and can play relatively well. It just comes down to basically angling and realizing that if you give your flat broadside, you can really get punished in this thing. So again, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to go back and watch a little bit of these videos and get the exact number rundown, you can. But in general, the Vanguard shell characteristics are the same as all other British battleship shell characteristics. Not the best AP pen, but decent HE. You see I switched to HE there because Colorado and Odin are both relatively angled. Not my favorite map in the game we're playing on right now. I really am not a huge fan of it. It basically forces you to have to play slow in the beginning. And you notice there that our friendly carrier is actually forcing those battleships out from behind that rock, that island, because they're constantly, he's constantly harassing them with torpedo bombers and spotting them, which actually is a big advantage. And part of the reason why I'm not a big fan of carriers because it can seriously impede strategies in this game that surface ships have, and there's no way for either one of those battleships to, based off of whatever the skill level is on those players, to be able to basically react and counter that aircraft carrier. So I wish at some point that in this game they would put something in there where you can manually switch to anti-aircraft or some sort of manual switch, because when you're the only thing that's getting targeted, you don't have any surface ships to shoot at or something, I think you should be able to take control of the AA guns or something like that, because otherwise you're at the mercy of the computer's, RNG roll on against aircraft, and I'm not a big fan of that. So maybe something like that in the future to help kind of balance these aircraft carriers. We'll see. But anyway, you saw there I took 2 torps. No cruisers in this game. Not a single cruiser. So I lost like 30,000 health from torpedoes. Chicago ended up taking out the Colorado because, it's such a balanced ship. The aircraft carriers, that they're not overpowered at all. But so you see Odin sailing at me here. Obviously, we all know Odin has what? Torpedoes, that's right. So, what are we going to do? We are not going to charge him down. We're going to start kiting away. We're going to throw some AP at him. We're going to get 11,000 damage. Now, this is kind of a gambling angle I'm giving up here. Not my best decision here with my angling, but it's a tough spot because I don't really want to go bow in because I'm worried about destroyers basically then being able to run down my side and throw torpedoes into my broadside. So I'm kind of having to pick a best of the worst situation here, which is not an easy choice. Yudachi pops up there. I ended up deciding not to shoot him because I wanted to get rid of this Odin. You see a salvo go out there. Get another decent hit on the Odin. A couple things I want to point out here. The heals on the Vanguard are very good. You can heal more AP damage and Citadel damage than other battleships. I think that's just kind of a acknowledgement that this is a tough ship to play by Wargaming. But now with all these buffs, honestly, I really am a fan of this ship. I really am. So I think that in general, if you know really what you're doing in this Vanguard and you don't really try to get the back guns involved as much, the reason why I feel relatively comfortable giving this Odin my broadside is he has pea shooters for guns. They really are not hard-hitting guns, and I'm going to be able to armor and angle up just enough to where I'll be able to take that bite out. And, I mean, like I was saying. So on the broadside, not the best armor, but when you have these low caliber battleships, as long as you give enough angle and then they kind of flatten up enough, you'll be more than fine with doing the damage. So Odin basically charges like a madman around the corner, gets into a bad situation here. You see Jervis pop up. Now, the thing about the Jervis and the thing about this Vanguard is you have the reload booster. So when you get these super aggressive suicide rushing kind of destroyers, you can really punish them and basically knock them off the board, because with the British HE, basically 2 salvos is usually enough to get rid of people. Of course, I left him with a tiny little bit there, and I hit the reload booster because I didn't really want to take a chance of him getting torps off on me. So I reline up the Udachi here. I don't think I gave it enough lead. Kind of tried to rush that shot. Ended up getting him for about 5k, so I actually did get him for about half his health. But that's my point. So let's say that Udachi was rushing us aggressively, and that was my first salvo. I got half his health that first salvo. I'll probably get about half his second salvo. And if he keeps closing the gate distance, then I'll hit the secondary boost, and I'll start trying to perform some evasive maneuvers, right? So that generally kind of that combo, right? So the HE with the reload boost, and then in worst case scenario, the secondary boost really gives this ship an actually pretty big threat to super aggressive destroyers who want to try to get in on those suicide torps. So you see, we actually did a really good job. This Ganaizen, myself, and a couple of destroyers really did a great job of cleaning this site up. This Lightning was instrumental in this whole situation because he kept a lot of these guys spotted, and he, along with the carrier, also initially kept the Colorado and that Odin spotted, which really flushed him out from their ideal positions behind that island where they could kind of get some shots and rain in on us. So at this point, I'm in kind of a tough situation here, mainly because the main engagement that we were in on this flank got mopped up pretty quickly, and the other ships are basically pretty far off in the distance. So we got a little bit of sailing ahead of us here, which I don't really mind because this gives us a perfect opportunity to give a quick little talk and a discussion about Vanguard's numbers. And I know I mentioned earlier that you can go back and look, but I'm just going to talk through them real quick here. So if you notice, the artillery number for the Vanguard with this build is 97, which is very high. I mean, that number is very high, and I think it's a little bit misleading because I don't think it really plays like that high of a number, right? I mean, to put that in perspective, right? So if I were to go and I were to switch over to, like, let's say Yamato, right, with the Takagi build, that number is 96. You're telling me weapons-wise the Vanguard's better than Yamato? I don't know about that one. So I don't know where that number comes from. I really don't. But yeah, so apparently it's 97. Apparently this thing should have better guns than Yamato. So, but getting actually back to not just ripping on Vanguard, because I do actually enjoy this ship a little bit. I'm trying to play a little more. The reload's very good, 22 seconds, 18.4 kilometers on the firing range, 42% chance to set fire, 5800 max HE shell damage, 13,750 AP shell damage. 13,750 is pretty ridiculous. 83 AA rating, it's acceptable, Nothing spectacular, but it's acceptable. Amagi's coming back into range here, so I'm trying to line up a shot. Anyway, back to some of these stat numbers. Maneuverability, 27.8 knots in the water, and that's with gyrating drill bits. So you figure that can be almost another 30-knot ship right there, okay? And 11.8 seconds on the rudder shift time. That's pretty darn good. But 850 turn circle, that's horrible. That's horrible. So you can kick the rudder relatively well, but you don't expect this thing to be turning on a dime, okay? Concealment, you have the access to the concealment mod. I wish Monarch would get it, but and this is the main reason why I want Monarch to have it. Your detectability by sea, 13.3 kilometers. 13.3 kilometers, pretty darn good. You figure that with an 18.4, 5.1 if my public education held up. 5.1 kilometers buffer range there. Pretty darn good. So Amagi's relatively broadside here. We're going to throw some rounds out. You see there 9K. And follow-up shot, I think I get a ricochet and a couple misses. So that, I like this ship for the most part. One thing I'm not a huge fan of, torpedo damage reduction 25%. That's not very good. So that could have been better, but is what it is. The ship can't have it all, right? And you have access to the reload boost, which is a big help. You still have access to your secondary boost. Biggest weakness on this thing, though, is that you don't have access to a spotter plane. So you don't have the option to say, hey, I actually don't want that reload boost. I want the spotter plane, or I want the fighter to help with the meager 83 anti-aircraft rating. So you don't have that access, but you make up for it with your access to the reload booster. Look at that shell grouping. And Sharon Horse pays the price. So I don't understand why Vanguard gets a lot of hate. I think it's just all about angling. You got to play it. The best I can describe this thing is you have to play it like a weakly armored Russian battleship, in that sense, where your side armor is so weak that you just cannot get away with flashing any broadside. Right? You can't do anything that would entice somebody to shoot in your side, because it is very vulnerable. But at the same time, your 32 millimeter bow and aft is serviceable. So you got to take the good with the bad. You can't be overmatched still, but take the good with the bad, and just know that this has a good mix of shells. AP and HE are both effective, and if you're noticing, this rudder shift is actually pretty decent. And the thing that I like about it is that you can really, the firing angles on those rear guns are not very good, but with the rudder shift, they're actually serviceable. But you have to be able to feel where you're at in the game. So I know Amagi just shot, and he's got a 20-something second reload. So I know I got a couple seconds here to get this shot off, right? So I'm not going to try to go broadside, because who needs to go broadside when you have Vanguard shells that are going to take out that Amagi up to 125,000 damage here. We've been doing a decent job pushing around here. So at this point, I say, hey, what the heck, let's get into the base. Let's really just finish him off here. We'll get some separation. Heaven forbid that Venom or whatever takes down a couple battleships, and all of a sudden that 200-point lead that we have goes bye-bye and disappears. If I go down here, because I only got 17,000 health and a heal, but still, I get that Shikaku gets a good torp strike run out on me. That's probably going to be close to enough to take me down. So I go down, and the other battleship, whereas he's out there, he's getting focused right now. I think it's in Iowa. So let's say that we go down, that's now a split, and then a destroyer gets HE bombed. Like, it's not the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in the world. So I just want to stay on this base a little bit. I want to get some more points. I want to put ourselves in a little bit better situation and really guarantee the win. So again, this wasn't some crazy game. That's not really what I was going for with this. I just popped in the Vanguard for the first time in a little while, and I realized, I should probably take this ship out a little more, especially with this new Nelson build. 5 heals on this thing is pretty ridiculous. With the improved firing range is also pretty awesome. So I would strongly suggest, if you're considering grinding up the British line, I would do it. I think that a tier 6 King George is serviceable. You just have to know what your ship is good at. You have to know what you got to do to it. Queen Elizabeth might be pound for pound one of the best tech tree tier 5 ships in the game. 4 is the Iron Duke. Iron Duke's serviceable. Again, same thing. It's a mid-pack ship, right? And then the Orion at tier 3, it's a tier 3 battleship. So just know what you're getting into with that, obviously, right? Slow lumbering dreadnought style, but the guns are relatively efficient and they're relatively accurate. So the British line, I think, is a good mid-tier line for most of it. And I think that Vanguard has finally pulled itself out of the basement of tier 7. You see those shells looked good that they're tracking on that aircraft carrier. I ended up getting the sinking. So that's going to do it for us here in this one. Ended up with, what did we end up with? 120 something thousand damage. So if you liked the video, give it a like. We will see you next time out on the high seas, guys.